Hello and welcome. It's been a bit since I've been here, and I thought the best way to get back into this would be to share with you the process I used to create my 50 States, 50 Days voting animation project that I posted on Facebook and Instagram. But first, let me give you some background. I joined Full Harbor, a Slack group for motion designers started by Austin Saylor, and during one of our weekly chats, Austin mentioned that he was running a class called the Personal Project Accelerator. The idea behind the class is to get those personal projects lingering on your hard drive out there into the world. The class is 4 weeks long and takes the students through process, ideation, mood boarding, sketching, and animation. Now, my animation was going to be a series about getting out the vote, and I had some ideas running around in my head, but I needed to drill down on those and figure out which idea would tell the story the best. As a former journalist, I turned to the 5 W's and 1 H: who, what, when, where, how, and why. Why and how. These principles help you make sure that you're covering all aspects of your story, that you're answering all the really important questions. It could be used with just about anything you're working on. Are you working on a story maybe? Maybe you're writing a blog post, or maybe you're making a video, or maybe you've got a business plan. By answering these questions, you drill down into the heart of the story and give yourself a framework from which to begin. So for my piece, it broke down into this. Who? U.S. citizens of voting age. What? Voting, the topic. Duh! The why? Because it's important that everybody get out there and use their voice to affect change for our country. The when? Now this could be an event or a deadline. Mine had a really hard deadline of November 3rd. I mean, you can't go beyond that. That's hard. Where? United States, nationwide. How? 2D animation with elements of hand lettering. I had also been working on my hand lettering, and I wanted to incorporate that into this project. Once I had my concept, I moved on to visual research. Now for me, this is kind of like a little visual dance party. This is where you get to take all those wonderful pieces, those beautiful pieces, folder them up, and save them to see how they're going to work for your piece. So for this, I created folders for style, typography, color, motion, icons, you name it. I went back through my folders and looked for patterns and began to call images down. Then I created my mood board and shared that with my fellow classmates. Let's take a look at my PDF. For style, I looked at using texture, I explored watercolor, I looked at color, I also looked at icon placement. I thought about using a minimalist style, also using monoline, and I thought about using 2 colors within the state itself, also exploring the use of typography overlaid on top of photography and large letter forms. For color, I kept mainly with the red, white, and blue theme, but I did throw in a purple just for fun. For lettering, I looked at script, I explored sans serifs, I explored inline elements as well as textured elements. I looked at monoline, I also looked at brushstrokes. I knew that I wanted the word vote to be in a sans serif, so I explored different typefaces, and then I took those and I traced them because I wanted the piece to have an overall organic feel. Finally, I explored some motion. I explored how I wanted the letters to come in. If I wanted to add texture to the letters, if I wanted to do like a bevel effect, or if I wanted them to come in from the sides or break apart and come in, if I wanted to use shapes to hide the letters and then reveal them. In the end, I knew I was going to get my icons from the Noun project, and that I would then take them into Illustrator and finesse them from there. Finally, I took a look at the overall style of the United States and individual state shapes. There's the traditional look of the United States with its curved edges, but then I found one on the Noun project that was far more geometric and really worked well for my overall style. As I said, I also wanted to work on my lettering while working on this project, but I also didn't want it to lead to frustration to the point where it would stop me from moving forward and making progress. It's so easy to do that when you're a perfectionist. You start working on something and then you begin to look at it and you're like, oh, I don't like this. This just isn't working. Then you reach the point where you're just like, no, I don't like this. I'm done. I'm out. Peace out. So to avoid that, I needed to come up with a workflow that would work for me and allow me to work on lettering but not have it completely take over. And I did this by creating constraints. I decided that the word vote would always be in a sans serif and would always be used within the state. I also wanted the state name to be hand lettered. For that, I decided to rely on a piece that I had done in the past for a friend and former student who now owns a letterpress studio in DC. Last year, I interviewed her about her experiences following graduation and creating and running her own letterpress shop. Fair warning, what you're about to see on screen is going to be a little wackadoodle, but let's get into it. So Alessandra and I went to school at the Corcoran College of Art and Design, and this is the final piece that I created for the intro of her video. I'm also going to go ahead and insert in here an image of the pencil sketch that I did prior to, so you can get an idea of how one translated to the other. I thought it'd be much easier if I went ahead and took this particular piece and took each letter from it and went ahead and built up my state names. That way I wouldn't be starting from scratch and I would be building an alphabet at the same time. Now let's go ahead and zoom out so you can see how this is like really kind of crazy. All right, this is not the proper way to go about things. Let me just say that very clearly. This is kind of out of control, but I was working really fast and I was trying to get each video out every day, so this is pretty much what I did. And when I do turn this into a font, I will be doing it the right way. This is where I started from, and this is the raw stuff that you're seeing. So the letters morph throughout the whole project, as you can see as I scroll through here. We sometimes have different S's going on, different L's, different things as I was playing with different letters. Each time I had to letter a new state, I would look at the states that I currently had and pick which state had the most letters in common with the new state. I would then duplicate that artboard and go ahead and build the new state name. If I didn't have a letter that was already existing, I went ahead and recreated it using my guides and looking at the other letter forms and drawing from those. As I said earlier, I knew that I always wanted the word vote to be inside of the state. Now, I had decided to also use Brandon Grotesque as my typeface because I thought that geometric letter forms would work well within the state. But to make sure, I went ahead and imported all of the state shapes along with the letter forms into Procreate and played around with the composition. This way, I was able to make sure that everything worked before I started animating, because I did not want to have to play with composition while I was in After Effects. This is my gallery, as you can see here, and you can see the various states and the shape and the letter shapes and how I've played with them. I want to take a look specifically at Texas to give you an idea of how I was playing around. In this first one, you can see that the word vote is going across the state, but it's left a lot of open white space, and it just looks kind of smushed in there, and it's just really not working all that well. If we move to the second vote, this is working much better, but the letter forms feel disjointed. We go to the third one. This one looks much better. The letter forms feel together. There's also enough space around the word itself for the icon so I can animate them, and it just looks overall and feels overall better. So I learned this new thing in Procreate. Did you know that you could copy layers from one Procreate comp into another? Let me show you how to do that. Click on your layers, open up your new group or whatever layer you want to copy over, hold it down and drag it onto the canvas. At the same time, click Gallery with your other finger. Go ahead and click on where the comp you want it to live in and drop it right on top. It says it's importing, it's imported. Now we're getting this crazy thing that says importing 5 items remaining. In a normal world, you would say, okay, I will wait for that because you think it's still importing, but it's a lie. Don't worry about it. Just hit cancel and you'll be fine. Now that the word vote is here, I can turn off the other layer and go ahead and layer these up just by dragging the E on top of the V, so on and so forth until we have the word vote. And there you go. Pretty cool, huh? The next step was to create a storyboard and animatic. These would be the roadmap for my animation and keep me on track throughout the project. A storyboard is a sequence of drawings meant to show you the direction and pacing of your overall project. My voting project started with California. And for each individual state, I wanted to have a little illustration representing that state. So for California, I chose the Golden Gate Bridge and I wanted to have a car drive across it. And as the car drives across the bridge, the O from the word vote is going to come zooming in on the car. The car, the bridge, and the O are going to continue to zoom down. We're going to see the sun, it's going to peek out from behind the O, so the car is going to disappear off screen. And we're also going to see inline rules begin to rotate around the O. As we begin to pull out of the scene, we begin to see that the icons start to animate on. We also see that the letters have texture inside of them that's animating. Once we see all of California on the canvas, we're also going to notice that there is a rule that's animating on. Along with that, we have a drop-down banner and a drop shadow that slides out from behind the state. Once everything is in place, let me just draw this banner here, type begins to animate on. Now we stay on scene for a bit so you can get the full experience of California and everything animating, but then it's going to reverse backward to the point where we come back to the car driving across the bridge. I'm now going to take some of these storyboards and translate them into style frames. A style frame is a fully rendered visual representation of your animation. This is where you will see your animation fully fleshed out in terms of typography, color, and composition. It's as if you took a screenshot of your animation while it was playing. You really shouldn't see too much of a difference visually between your animation style and the style frame itself. I'm in my InDesign file. This is just a rough breakdown of my script. Then we move into the individual storyboards that I captured from Procreate. Again, I've got the descriptions underneath each one. Now we move into my style frames. So you see the car driving across the bridge, then we begin to zoom out, then we have a just about fully zoomed out and then fully zoomed out. This shows you more or less what the final product is going to look like. And then once this was done, I just saved it out as a PDF and shared it. So now we move into the animatic. Animatic is a rough animation showing you the pacing of your piece. It shows you where your lags are, it shows you where your pacing is off, and it gives you an idea of what you need to fix before you move into actual animation. So let's get back into the iPad and take a look. All right, here we are. This looks crazy, doesn't it? Yeah, again, craziness. If I go into my layers palette, you can see that all of these layers are turned on. It's a frame-by-frame animation of the animation. All right, so I've turned off all my layers, and as I begin to turn on layers, you see stuff begin to happen. The car draws on, and then we just keep moving forward until we have the whole animatic. So now that I have all the frames turned back on, let's see how this animates. We're just going to come into here, we're going to click Animated GIF, and we're going to see the action take place. Yeah, it's kind of cool, isn't it? Granted, this moved a lot faster than my actual voting piece did, but this was a great start. We all know that organization is the key to success, and one of my goals for this project was to try to stay ahead as much as possible since I was posting daily. So I started with my folder structure. I created a folder for 50 states, 50 days. That was the name of my project. And within that folder, I had a folder for each and every state. So as we can see here, I have one for Alaska, Arizona, California, etc. I also have a base folder. Inside my base folders, I have a comps folder, icons, renders, and research. The idea here was each time I started a new state, I would just take this base folder, I would duplicate it, and I would change the name to the state that I was currently working on. If we take a look at Montana, for instance, you'll see that I have my comps folder with my Premiere file. I have some icons in here, some renders, and my research folder. My research folder contains images that were inspiring to me. It also contains now project icons that I'm considering animating for this state. Another way I tried to keep organized was by creating a Google Sheet. Within this Google Sheet, I had the name of the state, the main icon, what voting icons I would be using, state icons, and if I'd animated, if I posted this to Instagram, and if I posted it to Facebook. I started off very well. As you can see, I went all the way up to 26, and then things just kind of, it just stopped. However, I will say, if you do this in the beginning of your production and you gather all your assets before you begin animating, you are going to have a much easier time in the end, rather than trying to find individual assets the date of animation, because that'll just take far too much time. So again, the lesson learned here is to organize. Get your assets ready ahead of time. Get as much as you can ready ahead of time, so that way when it comes to animating, your process goes smoothly. And that wraps it up for this video. Just to reiterate, this is what we went over. We looked at story building using the 5 W's and 1 H. We also discussed visual research and creating mood boards. We discussed using constraints and using existing materials to speed up your workflow. We also looked at storyboarding and creating an animatic using Procreate. Finally, we touched on organization. Now, each of these probably could have been its own video in its own right, but I thought it'd be really fun just to show you a quick look at the process I used to create my voting series. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and if you have ideas for other videos in the future, please go ahead and leave a comment down below. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye!